Students, today we will deal with the biotic communities. A monospecific assemblage of living organisms in a population. An assemblage of population living in a defined area or habitat is called the biotic community. A biotic community is a complex assemblage of microbial community, plant community and animal community. The community units may be very large like the continent-wide coniferous forest or very small like the community of invertebrates and fungi in a decaying log. A different community occurs in each different habitat and environmental unit of larger area size, and in fact the composition and character of the community is an excellent indicator of the type of the environment that is present. Populations also interact with other members of their communities in much more ingenious fashions, which may have little direct role in the regulation of the specific groups involved, but which are fundamental to the maintenance of the community as a whole and hence to the existence of any species in a community. For instance, there is no direct interaction between deer and nitrogen bacteria in a forest. They belong to different food chains. Both have their own population dynamics and they are regulated by different aspects of the physical or biotic environment. Yet without nitrogen bacteria, nitrogen could not cycle and deer could not exist. Conversely, without members of the grazing food chain such as deer, nitrogen bacteria would have no nitrogenous waste to feed upon. Thus, in a biotic community, there exists a great interdependence among species of different communities. The very existence of any population is due to the fact that other populations also exist which make available energy and nutrients, regulate population size, recycle waste and buffer the community against the vagaries of the physical environment. Population exists in fact because they are part of biotic communities. Now we will deal with the types of the communities. According to Kendig, the communities may be distinguished as major or minor communities. The major communities are those which together with their habitats form more or less complete and self-sustaining units of ecosystem, except for the indispensable input of solar energy. Whereas the minor communities, often called societies, are secondary aggregation within the major community and are not therefore completely independent units as far as the circulation of energy is concerned. Now we will deal with the community characteristics. To know the community better, we have to know the characteristics of the community. So first of all, the first characteristic is community structure. As communities are dynamic entities of an ecosystem, they include populations that interact constantly with one another, with the patterns of interaction showing continuous variation both in time and in space. But at all times and in all situations, there is a pattern to the organization of the community that is ultimately determined by the complex of environmental factors characterizing the community. This characteristic pattern, often termed as the community structure, is reflected in the roles played by various populations, their ranges and the types of areas they inhabit. The diversity of species in the community and the spectrum of interaction between them and our precise flow pattern of energy and nutrients through the community Consequently, the structure of the community includes various aspects like the ecological niche. Each species has a specific position within the community designed as the ecological niche, and this very often stand for the functional status of the total role of the species within the community. The niche comprises all the bonds between the populations and the community and ecosystem in which it is found. These bonds include factors such as the tolerance ranges and the optima for all the abiotic factors. The sorts of organisms that can be utilized for the food by the population as well as the organisms that feed upon it, the areas in which the species can live and the population structure of the species. Every population has an ecological niche, and this niche is the major determinant of the structural, physical and behavioral adaptation of the population. The concept of niche has been extended to the categories such as spatial niche or the habitat niche and the trophic niche and the climatic niche, etc. Then there is pattern of species abundance and the diversity of the community. The number of populations in a community varies greatly over a wide range. Some communities of one prominent plant species may occupy a single layer of a habitat, such as the desert salt grass community or any other community of tundra, while the communities such as tropical rainforest or a coral reef may be multi-species and multi-layered system and may contain thousands of populations. The number of species in the community is termed the richness. Species diversity closely follows the number of constituent populations. When population constituting the community are small, there tends to be more diversity because the coexistence of different species in a community is regulated by the basic resources available within the ecosystem. But species abundance is not the only basis for measuring species diversity in all the classes. A gradual increase in species diversity is apparent from the polar regions to the tropics. Since a community is a natural assemblage of organisms that have evolved together to a high collective persistence level, its structure is based on its relatively distinctive species composition, which may be either sharply different from that of an adjacent community or may show degrees of overlap. Some species are found in only one community, whereas others live in many communities. Typically, in the aggregation of species that make up a community, only a few species are abundant in number of individuals or biomass, and the majority of the species are relatively rare. Not all the organisms in the community are equally important in determining the nature of whole community. Out of the numerous kind of organisms that might be present in a community, a few species generally exert the major controlling influence by virtue of their number, size or activities. This phenomenon, wherein various species within the community are dominated by one species or more than one species, is termed as the community dominance, and the dominating species are recognized as community dominants. Plants are more frequently dominant in the terrestrial communities than are animals. In aquatic communities, animals are relatively more important in this role, although dominance is more often not developed. Dominance is most commonly expressed in reactions of an organism on its habitat. Community dominants shoulder are full impact of the climate or the environment but modify this effect for other organisms within the community by tempering light, moisture, space and other conditions. Only those other organisms that find these modified physical conditions tolerable can exist within the community. Furthermore, dominants are ordinarily the most prominent species in the community, make up its greatest biomass and serve as the major source of food, substrate and shelter for the animals that are present. In a forest community, trees are dominant. They decrease light intensity, increase the relative humidity, intercept precipitation, monopolize most of the moisture and nutrients in the soil, decrease wind velocity and furnish shelter and food for animals. Grasses play a similar though less conspicuous role in the prairie communities. Further, in a forest community in which trees are dominant, species in the lower stratum are of shrubs modify the habitat still further and even the herbs exert some control over the physical conditions on the surface of the ground. The herbs and shrubs are termed as subdominant species and they have to tolerate the conditions established for them by the dominants, but they in turn are the modifier of the community composition in a secondary manner. Now let us discuss the trophic structure of the community. The diversity and hierarchical arrangements of the population or niche in a community present only one aspect of structure of the community. Equally important are those patterns of the interpopulation interaction that bind all populations together. The most important of these is the trophic structure, which determines the pattern of movement of energy and nutrients through the community. Communities, at least major ones, have many trophic levels such as producers, consumers and decomposers. The organisms most consistent in their trophic levels are the green plants. Few of them consume other organisms. The situation is less well marked in herbivores. Some eat only plants, but some, like the ostracod, may regularly eat animals if they catch them. Even though their usual diet consists of plants, carnivores are still less consistent. Many species are predominantly primary carnivores, that is, they eat mainly herbivores. Many others are mainly secondary carnivores with a diet composed largely of primary carnivores and so forth. But few carnivores, being highly selective in their diet, will avoid eating any animal they are able to catch if they are hungry. In addition, many animals such as raccoons, bears and man are omnivorous and will feed at all the trophic levels present in the community, while others such as frogs and many insects occupy different trophic levels at different stages in their life cycle. The food web of a community often has great amount of flexibility in the pathways through which energy may flow. In the community, though all the animals have some choice regarding their food supply, some of them, however, have the opportunity to feed at the more than one trophic level. This choice provides a multitude of potential pathways for energy flow and it has an important role in the stability of the community. One of the most important considerations about communities is their stability or lack of variation in them. There are two discrete senses in which this term is used. The first, community stability, refers to the degree of fluctuations in a population size of the population comprising the community. The second is environmental stability, refers to the fluctuations in the abiotic factor of the ecosystem. The two types of stability are closely related, and stable communities are generally to be found in stable environments, while unstable environments are more often characterized by unstable communities. The global range of a variation in community stability is extraordinary broad. Some communities like the tropical rainforest or the coral reef appear exceedingly stable, and the densities of their populations are constant over the long periods of time. Others, such as the tundra, are extremely variable, and they are made up of populations that fluctuate widely in abundance. Much of this fluctuation is due to variations in the environmental factors which the community cannot avoid. However, genetically determined adaptations that have arisen through natural selection also play a part in the determining the responses of a population to environmental fluctuations. Further, the structure of a community in which a population is found has a major role in determining the degree of environmental variabilities to which the species is subjected. There are at least two mechanisms by which community structure affects the stability or variability of a community. The first mechanism involves the relationship between the community structure and the microenvironment. Many organisms are protected from the full impact of environmental fluctuations because of the presence of other members of the community. For example, the floor of a conifer forest is protected from the winds, evaporation and temperature shifts, making it a much less harsh and variable environment for organisms than the forest canopy or an open field adjacent to the forest. The second mechanism by which community structure affects community stability is community diversity. But about the correlation of community stability and community diversity, many ecologists have expressed their doubts. Now let us discuss the edges and ecotone, or edge effect and ecotone. In the ecoline, the line of a demarcation between two communities is often very difficult in view of the chances of overlapping of one community over another. Such demarcation will be conspicuous only when the dominants of the adjacent communities show clear and characteristic differences. The transition zone between the two or more diverse communities is called the ecotone. The common example of ecotone are border between forest and grassland, bank of a stream running through a meadow, or between a soft bottom and the hard bottom marine community. An ecotone thus presents conditions that are intermediate to the communities which are on either side of it. The ecotones may be narrow or be wide, extending to the large areas. The community on either side of the ecotone may have a typical structure, but the ecotone is strikingly different. The ecotone has a higher diversity than either of the main communities, a diversity that is not directly controlled by the climate or further fundamental environmental factors, but because of the migrations of the individuals or different species populations from both communities. Further, a number of special populations can become adapted specifically to the ecotone even when both of the major communities are too simple or are otherwise unsuited for the successful colonization by the species. This potential for the ecotone to act as habitat for species found in neither major community is termed the edge effect. A common example of the edge effect in action can be seen in those species of the owl that live in or near the ecotones between forest and grassland. They depend on the forest trees for nesting and they do their hunting in the grassland, where they depend on field rodents for food. In man-made communities such as agricultural fields, transition zone between the field and the forest may act as a refuge for animal species formerly found in the ploughed area as well as for other plants such as weeds. Ecotones of this type are also the prime habitat of many species of insect, game bird and mammals. This is all about the characteristics of the biotic community. Next time we will deal with another topic of the syllabus. Thank you.